to show you things you might see because this is a little more complex than what we've been doing in class. So you may get questions like this where there are no parentheses. So in this problem, it tells us to solve for z. We have z's throughout this. So on this side and this side, we want to get all the z's to the same side. So I'm going to move this pz to the other side by subtracting. So that all of my z's are on the same side. 16z, 29z, negative pz equals negative v. Then, think about this like, if I did have parentheses and I had like z outside of something, whatever was inside, I would multiply that to everything if I wasn't trying to solve for z. I want to do the opposite here and get z back outside of those parentheses so that I don't have three of them. I just have one. So this is called factoring, but we're going to talk about that way later. So really I'm dividing these out, but I don't want to actually divide them and they disappear. So think about dividing it or like pulling it out, but not getting rid of it completely. So when I do that, 16 is left, 29 is left, negative p is left. And now I just have that one z on the outside. I can combine like terms on the inside. I'm assuming that's 45. And then to get z completely by itself, instead of multiplying it, because then I'd have multiple z's, I can get rid of this inside by dividing it on both sides. So then this inside cancels, and I'm left with the z equals negative v over 45 minus p, or you'll see that the negative is outside. So either of those would be fine. Do we have questions on that? I know I went through that kind of fast. Do we have any questions on that right now? There's one other type of example you might see. Instead of not having any parentheses, you'll see something with parentheses. Something like this. So here, I need to get y by itself, but I have a y inside the parentheses. So the only way to get that outside of the parentheses is to distribute first. So I have qa plus qy equals 67y plus 93. Then I would need to get all of my y's on the same side and everything that doesn't have a y elsewhere. So I can move 67y over here or qy over here, it does not matter. Let's say I move 67y over. And then I'm going to get rid of qa and move it to the other side. So now I have qy minus 67y equals 93 minus qa. Gets confusing because you have a bunch of different variables. Just try to keep those all straight. Then we're going to do kind of the same thing we were doing before, but the opposite now. Now I have y's and I want just one. So I'm going to take those out by dividing, factoring. So just q would be left here, just negative 67 would be left here. And then we do that same thing we did before. Divide q minus 67 on both sides. I'm going to rewrite this up here. So that those would cancel. And then we get, there are different variations of this answer, but I think this one matches it exactly. 93 minus qa over q minus 67 would equal your y. So again, I went through that fast. As you're doing this, you might have time after your test, or if not, if you want to come see me after school today, we can work through these answer any questions you may have. Come see me tomorrow morning, same thing, or Monday morning, Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon, whenever, even if you're doing it late.
And then I also put in an announcements last class. I have a sign-up sheet if you ever need to see me after school. So you have two options here. So if you need to visit one of us, but you're only available after school, I am available Monday and Thursdays every week. I can also do Tuesdays if that works best for you. I know next week they'll do activity buses starting on the 12th. So you can use that sheet to sign up and just ask like what you need help with specifically. And it just gives me a notification so that way I can schedule and plan accordingly in case there's any conflicts.
And then same thing for me. Make sure you sign up in Canvas. That way I also know to stay after. Sometimes I leave early if I don't have students coming after. All right, questions about that before we talk about the quiz? Okay, so I'm going to go over the quiz completely, every problem, talk about some mistakes, common mistakes I saw. As you are fixing yours, if you see something that you're not sure, why did I get this wrong, ask. Or if you have questions or still are not understanding where you went wrong, ask. If you don't have room on your quiz, you can flip it over to the back and just rewrite the problem or grab a scrap sheet of paper to redo the problem. Alright, this first section, majority you guys did well. It was really the bottom section, which I understand that can get confusing. So for number 1, you should have divided both sides by negative 67. I did see some subtracting or some adding. I think because if we forgot that these were multiplying and then did the opposite and added, I understand that. But these were multiplying, so you should have divided on both sides. N would have been negative 14 as your final answer. Make sure you're bringing down your signs. I saw some positive 14, so just be careful with that. Questions on that one? For number 2, we needed to get M by itself, so the easiest way to do that is to subtract 8 on both sides. Get negative 45 equals M. Make sure you're boxing in your answer. That way we know that is your final choice, final answer. I didn't really see a whole lot of issues with this one, except make sure if you're moving things to the opposite side, you're doing the inverse or opposite operation. Questions on that one? Number 3, you had like terms, so you should have combined those two to get 8n. And then make sure you're showing all of your steps, even if you just showed on one side. I don't assume anything with your quizzes and tests. I don't assume you did the next step, because then I could assume your whole test or whole quiz. So make sure you're showing me all of your work so that we can follow your thinking process. N equals 1 was the final answer for that one. I did see some moving a 4n over, which is fine, but you'd have to move it back because you wouldn't be able to combine those. Be careful with your math. Also, I saw some zeros here instead of 1, so just double check your math. Questions on that one? I feel like for the most part, we got those 3. Those were the easier of the 3. These ones were the ones I saw more issues with. Right? When you get something that is a fraction that equals another fraction, make sure you are cross-multiplying, but multiplying to everything. Some of you multiplied like 10 and x, 11 and x, but not the other numbers, or you multiplied 10 and negative 5, 11, and negative 4, but not the x's. Just be careful with that. So 11x minus 44 equals 10x minus 55. Again, be careful and double check your math. I think you may have some of you may have looked at it wrong and got, I just did the same thing, 50, not 55. Looked at 11 instead of 10 and got 55. Or looked at 10 instead of 11, or looked at 11 instead of 10 to get 40. So just be careful. And then you have choices. A lot of you did the same thing, moved 10x over, and added 44 to the other side. If you did the opposite, that was fine too. So then you would get just 1x on this side and negative 6 on the other, or you could drop the 1. X equals negative 6 was your answer for that one. Do we have any questions on that one? Number 5, you needed to distribute. Again, be careful with your signs. This should be a positive 14x and negative 12, and then bringing down everything else. Be careful with your math. Pick what you wanted to move. So I saw a lot of moving 4x over and adding 12. If you made this positive by accident, then the rest of that kind of messed up because then you subtracted 12 and got something else. So be very careful. So this would have given us 10x equals 50. And then again, make sure you're showing all of your work. This would have been positive 5 as your final answer.
Just because I'm going to be really picky for those who didn't do too hot and seeing people who are on their phones right now. So it's probably really good to ask questions now since we have a test coming up today.
What? Oh, okay.
I'm in the way. Sorry.
I noticed I keep forgetting that there's 2 and you write in blue and gray.
So you guys are always on the bottom, on the gray end, but do you have questions on that? Six was similar, but you had to distribute twice. Be very careful with your signs here. If you mess up something in the beginning step, it can mess everything else up, and then you end up with the wrong answer. When you're combining like terms, make sure you're doing whatever it says on the same side. If you are moving things, then you're changing the sign. If not, you would not change the sign. I saw a lot of issues with that. So 16k equals negative 60k plus 48 minus 35k plus 63. If you put minus 63, the rest of your problem was wrong. You combined the wrong, you combined them correctly, but then got the wrong number, which just domino affects everything else. So be very careful. When you combine your like terms, we had a negative 60k and a negative 35. So that would have given us a negative 95k. And then 48 plus 63 should have given us 111. So if you did not get one of those two, something in your math went wrong. So always double check that. I did see some of you move 16k over, which is not an incorrect step. You can do that. But if you move this over, there's nothing left on this side. So you have to put 0 equals and keep solving. Or, to avoid that, you could just move 95k back. And then divide everything by 111. Some of you, this is weird. I saw this problem done a bunch of different ways, and like there were mistakes made, and then some of the mistakes still got you the same answer. It was weird. But just be careful with your math. I was double checking. I was like, that works. Okay.
Task failed successfully.
Do you have any questions on that one or that section in general? So like I said, majority of you did better on the first section than the second. Second section where we saw a lot of issues. For things like 7 and 8, they're solved very similarly. There are different ways to go about doing both of them. Some of you move 2A over. So let's do that. So move 2A over. So we had Z plus 2A equals -4. And then move Z over. This was fine to do this way. Because then you don't have to worry about dividing by a negative. And then you could divide, you could do this one of two ways. Either divide everything by 2. So you have A equals -4 minus Z all over 2. You could have divided them separately. So you'd have A equals -2 minus Z over 2. Either of these would be your answer, and that would work.
Okay, we're moving on. So if you're just wondering, okay, well, how are we doing these steps? Because I know there's multiple variables in this. But if you go back to what we had learned on the first or second day, the don't call me after midnight, this process really helps lessen the confusion. Because each property will help figure out which things need to be moved from one side of the equation to the other.
So doing this checklist, I don't have anything to distribute. I'm trying to get A by itself because it says 4A. I don't have any like terms. I do need to move a constant or a variable to the other side, so that's why in this case we're moving to A. I'm going to show you another way where we move the constant. And then we added or subtracted to get that by itself, and then multiplied or divided at the end. So that method does work.
So it can totally be used as a checklist if you need to double check and make sure that you are good to go with the solution.
You don't have to write the second method, but I am going to show you just in case you did it this way instead and something was still off. Do this here, sorry, a little bit more space. So another way you could have done this is instead of moving 2A, move the 4 over. Let's say you pick that, and we're going to add that to both sides. So Z plus 4 equals -2A. And then again, you can either divide everything by -2. But if you do that, we normally don't see the negative in the denominator. So you would either need to put it out front and use parentheses, or change the signs of everything, which is why this is changed. So this would become a negative and a negative. So that could be one of your answers. I should rewrite that so it's actually different. That could be one of your answers. Or with the parentheses. Or if you did it separately, divided both of these by a -2. This piece right here would be just -Z over 2, or the negative out in front. This would still simplify. So this would look like the other one we did where we divided them separately. So there are multiple answers for this one. It's just how you write it.
And as long as you show the process, it's easier for us to understand how you got there. So we will take everything literally.
Can I ask you a question about number 7?
Mm-hmm.
Can that point shooting off?
normally in math we don't see the negative in the denominator. So you can put it out front like this, but use parentheses, or you have to change the signs. One of those two things, yeah. So I try not to take off too much. That's why it's only like 0.75. So each question is worth 2 points. 1 is for your answer. 1 is for your work. Each time I see a mistake, it's minus 0.25 from the work. So I try not to take off too much, but over time that could get to be a lot.
No wonder why I got some real fives. I'm still reading them too.
Yeah, so as long as, like I said, as long as you show the work, it helps us understand, but it'll also be easier for us to explain the feedback better in case you're just not really understanding why you didn't get the correct answer or why you didn't get the correct process.
8 can be solved all those same ways for 7. I'm not going to do all that for the sake of time. If you did it the opposite way, that's fine. I'm just going to subtract 3 on both sides. I don't have anything to distribute or combine. So then I move by subtracting, and my last step would be to divide. In this case, neither of these are going to simplify if I divide them by 2. So I'm going to divide it all by -2, but just change my signs or put it in parentheses. So like this, or actually changing your signs, -g plus 3 all over 2 equals a. So either of those. Some of you did separate it, but the separation I saw was like 1.5 and then minus g, and we weren't still dividing 2 by g, so be careful with that. Okay. Questions on that one?
So how did you just put that negative there on the
Right here.
Yeah.
So when I divided both sides by 2, this negative we don't usually see in the denominator, so we'll see either in the numerator, so that's me putting it there, or I could actually distribute the negative. So really I'm just moving the placement of it.
So then the one all the way to the right is the right answer, right?
Both of these are correct, either or.
Alright.
I think one is more simplified than the other, but I took both. For 9, we were getting x by itself. We really just needed to get rid of c. We can't combine like terms or distribute. The only thing we can do is move this variable to the other side. When we do that, we're just subtracting it to the other side, not to something specifically, because we don't have like terms. The c's would cancel, leaving x equals d minus r minus c. There's nothing else for us to really do. That is our answer. You could rearrange it so it's in alphabetic order if you want. That's not a necessity. So either or. Questions on that one? Yes. So either all together or separately, and because it has a negative, you either need to change your signs or put it out in front. Here. This one. You mean divide it so that you have like 1.5. We don't have to do that. But if you were doing that, these would have to be separate. You would have to divide these separately. You can only divide them all together if you separate them.
One last question. How did the d become negative on the first answer?
This one?
Oh, damn, I know. I just can't see it. It's fine. It's fine.
Okay. Alright. Okay. Alright. These two are easier than this one because it has multiple ways. We'll come back and do that. But this one, if we're getting a by itself, we need to get rid of c. These are multiplying together, so to do that, we would divide. So d minus r over c would be our answer there. That was the only thing we need to do for that one. So always be thinking about what am I solving or trying to get by itself, and then what could I do to get there. 12 is kind of similar to this one. If I'm getting A by itself, I need to get rid of M. So I could add that to the other side. And then again, you could put it in alphabetic order or not, does not matter. Questions on either of those before the bell rings? When we come back, we'll do 10 and then answer any last minute questions, and then everyone's cell phone is going to go in a calculator pocket once the test starts. Just remember that.
When we're done with the test,
Yes, when you're done.
how many questions are?
12. Oh, thank you. Alright, I'm going to go over this last one, and then we will get any other last minute questions, and then we're going to start the test. So for number 10, one way you could have done this, did you need to sharpen the pencil?
No.
Okay. Okay, you're good. One way you could have done this, if we were getting X by itself, we need to move C to the other side. So we could subtract C on both sides. Then we have negative X equals D plus R minus C. The biggest problem I saw here is if you move C to the other side, we forgot to include the negative with the X, and then thought we were done, but we weren't. So we still got to get X by itself. So we need to remember that this is really a negative 1. So we need to divide everything by negative 1. You can do this all at once or separately, doesn't matter. But regardless, all of your signs are going to change.
You have to divide by -1, or you
Yes.
just have to be X equals D plus R.
You have to divide by the negative 1 because there was a negative 1 here. So the only way to get rid of it is to divide.
But how about we didn't? How come we didn't do for number 9? Because number 9 has a 1.
Right, it has a 1, but if I divide by 1, nothing's going to change.
Negative. That's
Negative.
understand.
So all of your signs would change. This would become a negative D, a negative R, and a positive C. All of the signs change.
Doesn't matter what order.
No. So if you put it like this, or if you put it in alphabetic order, C minus D minus R, either one.
I just wanted to make sure.
Right? So you could do it that way. The other way you could do this is avoid dividing by the negative, which is similar to something we did above. So instead, if I chose to move X over, add X to the other side. At first, that doesn't really do anything. It doesn't get X by itself. But then I could move D and R. So I'd have C minus D minus R. I only subtracted D, not R. Equals X. So you get the same thing either way. It's just how you wish to do it. Do we have questions on that? Do you have questions on this section in general or at all? All right. Biggest thing with this section, remind yourself what you're trying to get by itself. Solve it just like you would if it had numbers in it, but it doesn't, so don't put numbers in it. But solve it like you would a regular problem.
Does it matter how the order is?
At the end.
Like, for example, number 12, doesn't matter how you put it. Like, let's say I were to do A equals N plus M plus P. Doesn't matter.
As long as you have the correct signs and the correct variables, I don't care the order. Alright. Any other last minute questions? For those home with you, do you want their phones still here? You want to see their phones?
I can